3 games without Kirill Kaprizov, and the secondary scoring has produced too many goals to count. 17 to be exact. The secondary scoring has come from everywhere, and so we will discuss the biggest factors for the Wild's surge in goals on today's episode of Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked on Sports Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Just as a reminder, you can find Locked on Wild on all of your favorite podcast platforms, absolutely free of charge. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, we look at the biggest areas that the Wild have received major bumps in scoring from, including the fourth line, the new trade deadline acquisitions, and a couple of the mainstays as well. My name is Seth Topal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, and the Wild in the 3 games without Kirill Kaprizov have scored 5 goals. They've scored 4 goals and 8 goals. 17 goals in 3 games for a team that couldn't buy a goal earlier in the season. And so one of our big fears, I think, as to if this team was going to be able to kind of offset the loss of 40% of their offense in Kirill Kaprizov. Those fears, at least through 3 games, have been put to rest. Now, the Wild in those games are 2-0-1, largely in part to a little bit of a lapse on defense and in the goaltending department, but we've had 3 big areas in which the Wild have been able to get some major bumps in scoring over this 3-game stretch so far in which Kaprizov has been out. Now let's start with the guys we expected to see goals from, and that includes the likes of Mats Zuccarello, Matt Boldy, and Ryan Hartman. And if you look at what they have done since Kirill Kaprizov went out of the lineup, Boldy has 5 points in the 3 games, 2 goals, 3 assists. Ryan Hartman has 5 points as well, 2 goals, 3 assists, and Mats Zuccarello has 4 points, 2 goals, and 2 assists. And so, number one, as to how the offense has been able to really find a new gear, is you have a few guys that have stepped up to lead the charge for this team. And you've got some differing styles as to how things are being done. Number one, Matt Boldy really starting to heat up. And it was something that we expected to see with the addition of Marcus Johansson to the good chemistry already between Matt Boldy and Joel Eriksson-Ek. But it's not only that, it's just, I think, putting some other people in the lineup that have a little bit more of an offensive pedigree. I mean, look at the game against St. Louis, that breakaway goal for Boldy on just a gorgeous pass from John Klingberg to set him in motion to be able to pick up that goal. So you have plays like that. You also have plays in which just members of his own line helping get Boldy onto the score sheet. And so I think seeing the confidence there, but also seeing Mats Zuccarello and Ryan Hartman continue their chemistry without Kirill Kaprizov on that line with them. It's no coincidence that those 2 guys have still been able to maintain that same level of scoring output without one of the best players in the NHL on their flank. And Sam Steele, in the 3 games since he has stepped into that spot, he has a couple of assists as well. And so the Wilds have, over the course of this absence, I think done a good job so far of trying to keep as much of the lineup congruent as they can in trying to take somebody who has similar skill sets to what Kaprizov does, the speed, the power, the playmaking ability. And so you've seen the Wild take Sam Steele, but also Sammy Walker, and put them into those spots just to try to keep that line and allow Mats Zuccarello and Ryan Hartman to continue to attack the way that they do. And so, big reason as to why this offense has been able to do what it has over these last 3 games is those guys being able to still operate like a top line by the coaching staff putting a similar element with them to allow them to continue to just do their thing. And then on the Matt Boldy side, this is something that we have been waiting for a while in seeing some signs of life from that line and just waiting for the results to finally come through and reward Boldy with a couple of goals. Now, 8-goal game against the St. Louis Blues. Obviously, a lot of people had points in that one, but you look at it too, 5 goals against the San Jose Sharks. You had 4 goals against the Arizona Coyotes. And so it has not just been, the one big game to offset things. It's been 5 goals here, 4 goals here. And you've got those 3 guys at the top of the list leading the charge and allowing this offense to still flow, even without their biggest playmaker. Now, the other interesting thing I wanted to mention, too, because this is something I've been keeping an eye on the Matt Boldy front as well. Just watch Matt Boldy when he has the puck entering the zone, and he attacks it in a similar way to how Kirill Kaprizov does, but he also has the strength and the power with the puck to be able to get into the zone even when facing traffic and avoid turning it over to help the offense get into the zone. And so that another part of the equation that was lost with this team was Kirill Kaprizov's ability to enter the zone. But you've seen guys step up in that aspect as well, whether it be guys like Boldy physically pushing themselves in, or just some more crisp type passing entries that we've seen from the old wily vets like Mats Zuccarello and Ryan Hartman. So there's been an interesting kind of 1-2 counterpunch with that as well, in addition to just everybody scoring goals all the time. Is you've seen a little bit of this veteran approach to be able to do the other things to offset what Kaprizov does on a nightly basis. So, offense, number 1, you're getting guys to step up and lead the charge for this team. Another part of it is a balanced lineup continuing to score, led by a line that is really finding their form over the last 3 games, that being the 4th line. And so we'll give some love for the combo of Ryan Reeves, Connor Dewar, and Mason Shaw as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by the official sportsbook partner of Locked On, FanDuel Sportsbook. March Madness is here, and there is no better time to place your bets than the craziest month of college basketball and sports that exists. And whether it be buzzer beaters or big time upsets, FanDuel can help you make the most of this March NCAA season. And it's the perfect time for new customers to swing in and get in on the fun, because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. All you have to do is download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from money lines to point scorers to three-pointers drained, everything that makes the March Madness absolutely great is all at your fingertips with FanDuel. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Locked On. Continuing today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, make sure you check out the Locked On NHL podcast to get the full lowdown on everything going on throughout the NHL as we gear up for the stretch run and the playoff push. Locked On NHL is available on your favorite podcast platforms, absolutely free of charge. Leaders. We talked about Mats Zuccarello, Ryan Hartman, and Matt Boldy stepping up to fill the shoes of Kirill Kaprizov with him on the bench, mending up, resting up, getting ready for the start of the postseason. So how else have the Wild been able to put on this offensive display in the 3 games since Kaprizov came out of the lineup? The fourth line has caught fire, ladies and gentlemen, and it is no coincidence that the likes of Ryan Reeves, 2 goals, 2 assists in the last 3 games. He's got 4 points and back-to-back multi-point games on the season, which is something that Reeves is not known for throughout his lengthy NHL career. You also have Connor Dewar with a goal, 2 assists, 3 points. Mason Shaw with a goal, 2 assists, and 3 points. And so all of those guys have really, I think, hit their stride over the last couple of weeks, which when they are going and playing well, that is something that allows Dean Evason to ride those guys for extended stretches and be able to give the rest of the lineup some breathers. And Reeves had the Gordie Howe hat trick a couple of games ago. He nearly had it against the St. Louis Blues. Honestly, I find it ironic that there wasn't really a fight other than the near brawl between Marc-Andre Fleury and Jordan Binnington, because that just seems like that would have been a logical spot to have it happen. But I think what you're getting from this Dewar, Shaw, and Reeves line is another good example of how this Wild team is able to score goals without Kaprizov in the lineup. Is you're getting big bodies to the net to be able to deflect pucks in. Ryan Reeves has done that with his 2 goals that he scored over the last couple of games. The first goal that he scored was a deflection right in front. And against the Blues, Tomas Greiss let a saucy rebound just bounce out in front of him, and Reeves was able to kind of 360 spin it into the net. But if you get Reeves to the net and you allow Dewar and Shaw to win those battles on the outside and keep the offense cooking, that is another strategy that is going to really help this Wild team out to be able to make life miserable for opposing goalies. And so with Reeves assisting there and starting to add some offensive repertoire to his vocal presence and his physical presence, it just has led to this team seeming like they are starting to get a little bit of that swagger back. And offensively, too, we can't discredit what Mason Shaw and Connor Dewar bring to the lineup as penalty kill specialists. The ability for those two, it seems like it happens on a nightly basis, where they're able to generate turnovers at the top of the defensive zone and head back the other way on a 2-on-1, breakaway opportunities sometimes to be able to come away with goals that way as well. And so the fourth line, finding a way to manufacture some offense has really been a huge boost for this team. And it was on perfect display against the St. Louis Blues. Reeves had a goal, and just seeing that fourth line get extended opportunities to really harass the goaltending combo of Jordan Binnington and Tomas Greiss was just a lot of fun because it's an easy group to root for. I think a lot of people had a lot of fun with Ryan Reeves and the interview that he did with TNT, both before and after the game. You know, he did the tarps off bit. That was a lot of fun as well. But he's got a big personality, and that is something that that personality is something that is typically always there. But then when he gets to where he is adding that production on the ice, then you're getting a nice double whammy that has really helped this team continue to find ways to honestly make it seem like, and I'm talking half in jest, make it seem as though they didn't necessarily need Kirill Kaprizov all this time. I have seen a couple of notions on the Kaprizov front, but honestly, I think the simplest thing is this. This team with Kaprizov out of the equation was just put into a situation in which they had to find other guys to step up to be able to put the puck in the net. We've seen some of the leaders. We've seen the emergence of the fourth line being able to consistently assist in that area as well. But the final piece of the puzzle over these last three games has been the trade deadline additions that Bill Guerin made at the trade deadline to help inject a little more veteran presence in this lineup. Oh, and what a coincidence. All of those guys have scored since Kirill Kaprizov came out of the lineup. And so to finish today's episode, we'll talk about those trade deadline acquisitions as we continue to look at how this Wild offense found their groove without Kirill Kaprizov. More of that coming up here on Locked on Wild after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, make sure you check out the Locked on NHL podcast to get the full lowdown on everything going on with your favorite NHL teams. Playoff push is coming right up, and don't miss a minute of it with Locked on NHL. So we talked about the leaders, the guys you'd expect to score the goals here. All 17 of them that the Wild have scored in the 3 games since Kirill Kaprizov left the ice. I did forget one very glaring mention in the guys you'd expect. Joel Eriksson, he did score in these 3 games. It was a power play goal against Jordan Binnington. You'd expect that type of style for Eriksson. He just jammed it home. And so even on the power play, Joel Eriksson able to assist by just pounding in front of the net to be able to knock one home. And so Eriksson stepping up as well in the Kaprizov absence to help out on special teams, because that's another big area that we were concerned about where the goals were going to come from, was the power play. Kirill leading the team in power play goals by a large margin. And so Joel Eriksson stepping up there. We've seen Mats Zuccarello. We've seen Ryan Hartman step up in that regard as well. But the trade deadline acquisitions for Bill Guerin, you look up and down the lineup. You've got Oscar Sundqvist, who scored his first goal as a member of the Minnesota Wild against the Blues. And again, it was just another one of those shots in front of the net that Jordan Binnington could not corral, and that led to being rammed home for a goal to help the Wild further put Jordan Binnington into tantrum mode. But how about John Klingberg? In these last 3 games in which Kaprizov has been out, Klingberg, 1 goal, 3 assists, so 4 total points in those 3 games. He's also a +2 in the lineup as well. And I know Defensively, it's been a little bit of an adventure at times with Klingberg, but I think getting Jonas Brodin back in the lineup and getting Jake Middleton back in the lineup is going to help. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we see Klingberg get some opportunities with Jonas Brodin, because then you can put him in a similar role to where Matt Dumba has been, to where you kind of use a better defensive defenseman to help overshadow some of those defensive deficiencies from the other side of that combination. But Klingberg with 4 points in those 3 games, Sundqvist with the goal against the St. Louis Blues, Marcus Johansson also scoring in the 3 games since Kaprizov has been out of the lineup. He has 3 points, in fact, in those 3 games with a goal and 2 assists. So Johansson comes in, slots into that spot on the second line, and Matt Boldy starts to pick it up. Sundqvist comes in, and he's got immediate chemistry with Freddie Gaudreau and either Marcus Foligno or Sam Steele. And so it just is a bunch of guys that are fitting in and allowing this team to really spread things around to where they do start to look a little bit like the team that we saw last year. Now, obviously, they're having to do the things in a little bit different way than last year's team did. But you've got that depth now in the lineup, and all those lines are starting to heat up to the point that you can't really lock down one particular line in hopes of trying to stop this offense. And the final piece of this puzzle, I said there were 3, I lied. There are 4 factors as to how this team has really started to get the goals going here in a hurry. It's the defensemen stepping in and helping out. And we talked about Klingberg's stats. Jared Spurgeon, 3 points himself over these 3 games with a goal and 2 assists. But Alex Goligoski as well had the breakaway goal against St. Anne. Another aspect of that game that was just fascinating. After Jordan Binnington tried to get the St. Louis crowd going after the 4th goal that he had allowed and the 3rd that he had allowed in a span of like 2 minutes, trying to get the crowd pumped up, and then Goligoski scores again to give the Wild back the lead. And then he pumps up the crowd a little more subtly than Mr. Binnington did. But we're seeing this D-core start to step up into the play a little bit like they did last year. And I don't think that is a coincidence with the fact that John Klingberg is now in the lineup. We saw on his goal just a guy at the top of the zone who really has no problems shooting, as opposed to some of the other guys in the lineup who are looking pass first in that opportunity, Merrill, others. Klingberg is comfortable taking that shot from up top, and he still has plenty of juice on that thing, as that shot was a rocket that ended up going in for his first goal in a Wild uniform. But you're seeing all these signs of just everybody stepping in to help to turn this offense into not one that relied on one player and really had no other options beyond that were doing things consistently, to now just this well-oiled machine that is getting production from everywhere, starting to get the power play back on track. And, it's a situation too where if this team can keep those elements on track and then add players back in, add Jonas Brodin back into that mix, you add Jake Middleton back into that mix, then eventually you add Brandon Duhaime into that mix, and eventually then you add Kirill Kaprizov back into that mix. If those secondary scoring options are still clicking at that point and you add Kirill back in, that's where things get a little tricky, because that's been the one thing that this team has not had consistently this season is the offense. Now, I know the penalty kill has started to leak over the last handful of games, but if that is just a blip, you get that back on track and you pair that with this offense as Dallas and Winnipeg continue to lose. Picture's starting to look mighty interesting for this team come playoff time. We'll have a complimentary episode coming out later today. We're going to take a look at kind of the state of the Central Division playoff push with a look at games remaining for the big contenders that are playing out for spots in that Central Division playoff push. So look for that later today. That will do it for today's episode, though, of Locked On Wild. So now take this opportunity, if you haven't already, to subscribe and follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts so you don't miss out on any big Minnesota Wild news as we continue the push to the playoffs and also keep you updated on Kirill Kaprizov's status over these next couple of weeks. You can find us again on YouTube, all your favorite podcast platforms, all your favorite social media platforms. So give us a follow. I guarantee you will not regret it. And we've got plenty of content coming for you here as we move throughout the rest of the season. That includes new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.